Self-Portrait as a Soldier, 1915, oil on canvas, and it's by Ernst Ludwig Kirchner. This is known as German Expressionism. This is our example of German expressionism in the period of World War One. If you remembered looking at the other slide, Kathy Kolowitz memorial sheet for Karl Liebknecht, that's also an example from just after World War One. So the bold expressiveness of color used by the Fauves, if you remember from Goldfish and Matisse, had a big impact on German painters. However, although color plays a prominent role in German painting of the 20th century, the expressiveness of the German images is due as much to the expressionists' wrenching distortions of form, ragged outlines, and agitated brushstrokes. And I think this is clearly showing those particular features that we're going to be able to discuss. So, this particular artist, he actually was the leader of a group of painters called the Die, and it's literally DIE, and then it's a new word, Bruck, Brucke. It's also known as the bridge. And basically, in general, the Die Brucks artists protested the hypocrisy and materialistic decadence of those in power. But the painting addresses Kirchner's fears and anxieties of the war and symbolizes the reactions of the artists of his generation who suffered the kind of physical and mental damage. So, brutality depicted here is the psychological self portrait. Um, so that's what we're going to discuss. And I know when you're looking at this, I don't know if you noticed, but you do see an amputated limb on this one hand, on his right hand. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the fears and anxieties that are going to pertain to that. So Kirchner was 34 when World War One began, and he was so full of dread about being a soldier that he volunteered to be a driver to avoid being drafted for the front lines. He became a driver in the Mansfelder Field Artillery, region number T5. But very soon thereafter, he was declared unfit for service due to general weakness and lung problems, and was sent to recuperate. It was at this time that he painted this metaphorical autobiography, which reveals his unshakable, almost pathological fear of effects of war on himself and as an artist and a human being. Okay, so he's gonna kind of enter into kind of like a dark time for himself. Kirchner portrays himself in his studio. And again, this is titled as a self-portrait, so we do see him being displayed here. So this is actually him in the uniform. His back is turned away from the nude model and the unfinished painting behind him. So here's the nude model, and then there's a painting that the model is looking at. He wears the uniform of the regent, but he is not out on the battlefield. So if you note that, and in his right hand, it has been amputated, leaving a bloody stump above his grangerous wrist. His eyes are empty, the cigarette dangles loosely, the angular elongation of his face, if you notice, all these reflect the psychological trauma he is stuck in. He can neither be a soldier nor find peace in his work. So the amputation is a metaphor. He didn't really actually sever off his hand or anything happened to his hand, as he was never in an active service. So the loss of the right hand and bloody stump stood for basically all his litany, his series of grievances of losses, and his ability to paint and his creativity, his artistic vision and inspiration. In the larger sense, also expresses anxiety of his potency and manhood. His mental and physical condition continued to decline during the rest of the war, and it worsened by alcoholism and morphine addiction. He recovered for a time ah, and had major exhibitions in the 1920s and 30s. From 1926, he suffered from depression, which worsened, and in 1937, when 639 of his works were confiscated from public collections by the Nazis, 32 were included in Hitler's Degenerate exhibition, and that was an exhibition that was basically making fun, mocking art. We also saw Kathy Kollwitz being exhibited there. In despair about the political situation in Germany, his physical health, and overwhelming loneliness, he actually is going to commit suicide in June 1938. So this is all about fears of war and the anxiety and the fact that he could not actually be part of the actual active service, kind of dreading it, and what he could try and contribute, they let him go for. So take it for what it is, and also just pay attention to the use of the bolds of color, and this is going to be German Expressionism. Okay? Short and sweet.